Hello there, adventurers. Ben.
Danielle.
And you're watching the
Malik Adventures.
The channel where we do
anything we want.
And if you're new to the channel, Mr. Astro says,
go subscribe.
And if you're returning to the channel, Mr. Racky says,
gives you a
heavenly
hello.
There you go. Sorry, the wind's blowing all my thoughts away.
And Xavier and Sabrina tell you
to like the video,
subscribe,
comment down below, and
share the video.
But first, so we are sorry about all the wind, but it's windy out here where, Danielle?
In Hutchinson, Kansas?
Yes. And where are we at in Hutchinson?
What is it called?
The Strataca Salt Mine?
Yeah.
So we're out
underground salt mine.
Yep. So we're out here. We're on our way to animal exotic farm weekend, and we decided to stop here before going out there and see what this is all about, because I've never been here.
I've been.
You have, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see if Ben freaks out, because I'm not a fan of being underground, but we'll find out. Shall we?
Yep.
Let's go.
what the miners call a wall that was used to direct airflow. This bulkhead is made of 1.5-inch thick tongue and groove planks supported by 6-inch by 6-inch timbers and sealed with black tar paper on the backside to keep air from that part of the mine from coming into this side. It was slowly being crushed by the roof, but as you can see, it finally came down. On the platform are a couple of two-thumbed gloves. In the 1940s, when this area was being mined, everyone conserved materials for the war effort. The miners would wear the gloves until they wore out the palms. Then they would wear them on the opposite hands, using the second set of thumbs until they wore out the backs of the gloves. Now, stories have been told that Mr. Carey, the owner of the Carey Salt Mine, was always after the miners to pick up their trash and not contaminate the salt. Well, apparently a miner rolled up these gloves and stuffed them in a blasting hole, because that's where we found them 60 years later when we opened this part of the museum. Now, if you look closely at the salt wall to the right, it appears there's another glove stuffed in a blasting hole. As you look to your left, you'll see a rare sight, what the miners call a roof fall. The pieces on the floor used to be the roof, but over a number of years, the salt started sagging away from the compacted mud layer above it and eventually fell. Now, even though only a few rooms ever develop a roof sag, everywhere in the mine that people will walk, drive, or ride, we monitor the roof, and sags are removed when necessary. Can you imagine how it must have sounded when this roof fell? From 1923 to 1983, the miners used a rail system to transport salt from the mine face to the salt skip, where it was hoisted topside. Then, in 1983, they switched to a conveyor belt system. On the left is a car that was used to haul salt, and railroad tracks that were abandoned when mining left this area in the 1950s. The miners would use the same rails and ties over and over, since bringing more down the skip was both time-consuming and costly. Our train crew ripped up and hauled back abandoned rails and ties from the mine that were used for our train track. Almost 5,000 feet of rail for the track you're riding on. At the next curve, we'll pass by other original cars used with the rail system, including a hand-wheel-operated rail-bending car. Everything that comes down in the mine stays in the mine. And if you look at the lit area, you'll see that this is even true of mining trash. Now, we know this area was mined in the 1940s and used as a break area in the 1950s. And we found many name brand products in this trash pile from that time period, and some of which are still around today. There are a couple of things that we noticed here. One, there's a calendar from 1953 on the floor by the rocks on the left. And two, When we found it over by the pillar, the great trash can, well, it was empty. We consider all these items to be artifacts, which only proves one person's trash is another's treasure. In case you were wondering, trash isn't the only thing miners left underground. And apparently this area was used as a restroom. Oh, no fancy porta pots here. And they weren't very careful with the toilet paper either. And this is one reason we say, don't lick the salt. As we round the curve up ahead, two spotlights will come on. The first, on the left, will highlight a stack of empty cardboard dynamite boxes. Then on the right, you'll see a pillar that is scaling or spalling. This means that the salt is breaking away from the wall. And like roof sags and floor heaves, this is a natural occurrence in a salt mine. And as your ride continues, keep in mind, we've tried to leave the mine just as it was years ago. Now, when we get to the station, please remain seated when we stop and do not get off the train until instructed to do so.
Yeah, pretty excited.
Get off and get it for you. It's much safer that way. If you have any questions about what we see out there, there is a point where we'll stop and get off and get a piece of salt at our big salt pile. That'll be the only time I take questions. So if you do have any, just hold them till we get to that point. But here we go.
Logan or Lars, you want to go ahead? We're going to wait for the Ari.
First thing is here on the right. There's this big pillar here. You can see the floor is heaving up. You can see there's also a big crack in the floor about right here. This is a very good example again of a floor heave. As the weight that's above us, it's pushing down on this pillar. Pillar gets pushed into the floor, squeezes the salt, and the floor heaves up. Salt has weird elastic and plastic properties to it. It's going to bend a little bit before it breaks, so that's why these floor heaves are hollow underneath. And at the bottom of this floor heave is something called anhydrite. Anhydrite's very tough, it's very compact, not going to get pushed around very easily. So if the floor can't go further down, it's going to go back up. Reusing. as much as they could. Because there's a saying down here, what comes down in the mine stays in the mine. Anything you bring up or down the mine shaft that's not salt, you have to halt salt production to get it down here or back up. When you do that, you lose time and money. They did not like doing that unless they had to, so whatever they brought down, it had to be essential. It was probably not going to go back up. So when they were finished with something, they either threw it off to the side and left it there, or they found a different use for it. Now we're going to cross the rail bed. It's going to get very bumpy, so just hold on. Here, this is called a stub wall. They call it that because they didn't finish mining through here all the way. If they did finish mining through here, it would have cut back about right here, and it would have matched up lengthwise with the rest of the pillars. But they looked at it, they saw all the red salt, all the dark and muddy stuff. They said, you know what, we can see this, it's not pure enough. What's the point of mining it out if we're not going to use it? So they stopped mining here, and they continued to mine somewhere else. Went all the way into it, there'd be a big rectangular gap in the wall. So they cut it out and then brought it over here. We have a couple of theories as to why they decided to do that. One of them has to do with a company called the AEC, or the Atomic Energy Commission. They wanted to see if they could store nuclear waste in the salt mine. And like all experiments, all the experiments they were doing, you have to have some kind of control. In this case, that means what does the salt look like unaffected by the chemicals? We think this slab could have been a part of that control. But another theory involves Emerson Carey, who used to own the salt mine. Around the same time, he was building a new corporate office. He wanted to have a big pillar of salt sitting in the foyer. So we think that slab could have been a piece of that pillar. On the front half is down here. That happened about a few months ago, where the front half broke off and hit the ground there. But we'll see a much bigger one here in just a little bit. If you look beyond the boxes on the floor, you can see tire tracks and footprints left from the 50s. They were made in that decade and they've stayed here ever since. There's this little mason jar sitting by itself. They like to call that the miner's lunchbox, because back in the day, when they didn't have a microwave down here, they would take jars like these, fill it up with some super stew, take it into work, set it down on some running equipment or under a light, go do some work for a few hours, and then come back. It's nice and warm, just in time for lunch break. But blasting the whole wall in this case would mean that pure salt would have mixed with all that dirty salt. It would have been a huge waste of time just to holes in this wall. This was a sample gathering area. So they would drill a hole into the wall and then put a bag up underneath that hole, and then the salt would fall into the bag. They would take the bag, close it up, label the elevation. Elevation was a concern because down here it's white, but it's more chalky looking. It doesn't reflect the light like pure salt does. That's because that's not pure salt, that's calcium. Calcium is very abrasive, very rough on the machinery, not what they were looking for at all. So they decided to mine uphill a little bit, took the floor up with them, and they took the ceiling up with them. But unfortunately, they went a little too high and they ended up causing a roof fall. Those tags are numbered. They can say MS-25, MS-50, MS-100, or just one. MS stands for microseconds, and that's because they have a specific sequence of blasting of how the walls get blasted down. If they deviate from it at all, it's not going to work. So each tag goes to each explosive, which shows when that explosive goes off in that sequence. They did that with dynamite, and they still do it today with their ANFO. ANFO stands for ammonium nitrate and fuel oil. Muck pile. This is a single muck pile because it's one room worth of salt here. But they'd blast the wall, all the salt would come down, they'd collect it, take it to the hoist, haul it topside. But this pile is still sitting here. Again, we're not sure why, but we have a couple of theories. One theory is that this could have been a backup or reserve pile just in case if something were to happen, if a machine broke, for example, then this pile is ready to go. It just needs to be taken up topside, and they can keep things going a little bit, make some amount of money while that machine gets fixed, instead of having to stop everything because one thing broke, because that can happen down here. But another theory involves something called mineral rights. When you own a piece of land here in Kansas, you own that land down to the core. So if they were mining in this direction, if they did not have the mineral rights from the landowner topside, they would have been doing this illegally. They would have had to stop. Back when they were mining in this area, and then the other two would have run the lights, but they had lights installed here. But there's obviously the crystal pod here, but their main concern was not the crystal pod, it was what's below it, the reddish stuff right beneath. That right there is anhydrite. That's stuff we talked about earlier. That's at the bottom of the floor heaves. However, further down there, it's going to be gray in color. Up here, it's red because of sylvite. That's what's making it red. And obviously, it occurs mostly down deeper, about 800 feet underground instead of 650. So it is a little bit rare to be seeing it at this level, also in this color. Occasionally, we do come across the dates written on the wall here. Those are called taggings. That just is how they measure their progress. They go every month. Nowadays, they use spray paint. Before that, they did use those little carbide lamps on the front of the hard hats. They were little open flames. That was also before flashlights. They would take that little light, that little flame, and they'd write the date in soot. They'd burn it onto the wall. So that is what this is right here. It's kind of hard to see, but June 1st of 1954. There's that one. There's a clear one down here. Just this will be where you can grab a piece of salt to take with you as a souvenir, but before you do, just a few things. As you're looking through this pile, just be sure, if my laser wants to work. You know what, never mind, I'm going to step off here in a minute. So this is our salt pile here. As long as you stay in between here and in between that pillar over there, you can look through this whole area here.
Be sure you don't step up on any of this salt pile here, because this is all pretty slippery and sharp, and we don't want you to fall and hurt yourself. Salt's not very forgiving. You can grab one piece to take with you. It just has to fit inside the white hard hat, and if it doesn't, then it's a little too big. That's why this is here. We got about 5 minutes. You guys can go ahead, exit off.
Shine your light right on top of them. Yeah, there you go.
Loading ramp. Now in the 40s and 50s there were two vehicles. One of them was called the Joy Loader. The Joy Loader would scoop up the newly blasted salt off the floor, push it up a small conveyor belt into the other vehicle, which was the trolley car. When the trolley car was filled up, a miner would drive it to the nearest loading ramp like this one. From there, that salt would be put into the rail carts here on the rail bed and then taken down the coast. Here actually caught fire and then burnt to the ground. That's why there's soot all over the place here. There was a fire in this area. This fire happened back in the 60s or so. It's been decades, and yet the soot and the smell is still here after all this time. And then finally, here on the left, this floor heave in particular, it's the biggest one we have for the museum. This one, we're just waiting for it to either collapse where it's at right now, because it's hollow underneath, or it could keep on rising, touch the ceiling, and then collapse. From what I hear, it is rising about 1 to 2 inches per year, so very, very slowly but surely.
Well, we made it, and I didn't die.
Yeah, good job, dude.
No, it wasn't scary at all. No, but we got some cool things. We got some salt.
Salt
So,
rocks.
I got piece 2, and then we got 2 little ones. We'll add a picture of them here so you can see them a little bit better. But yeah, it was pretty fun.
Yeah, and we found out
The gray building back there, that is the one that the miners that are still mining today use.
the hoist.
The hoist to go up and down, which wasn't as scary.
Yeah, see?
Not too bad. Let's go do another one. Not today, though. But until next time, friends, make sure you stay safe.
Stay magical.
And as always, keep
Adventuring.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.